ago, Oscar Robertson is recognized as perhaps the greatest sports figure ever to come out of Indianapolis. But 100 years ago, Indianapolis produced another spectacular athlete named Oscar, considered by those who saw or played with or against him, perhaps the greatest all-around baseball player that game has ever seen. Only a few folks had that honor. The rest of us are only now learning about the great Oscar Charleston. Because of his awesome power and barrel-chested physique, many called him the Black Babe Ruth. Because of his hitting, speed, and take-no-prisoners approach running the bases, many called him the Black Ty Cobb, to which his fans could only point out, excuse me, Babe Ruth or Ty Cobb was the white Oscar Charleston.
Good hitter, good hitter, good hitter. The fans was tickled to death when he came to bat.
Charleston was one of the greatest ball players that ever lived.
Indianapolis' Bill Owens and Chicago's Bobby Robinson are both in their 90s, but the years have not dimmed their memories of playing with or against Oscar Charleston in the Negro Leagues. Owens is an all-purpose infielder. Robinson is a slick-fielding third baseman, recalling a player who did everything memorably.
Greatest fielder you ever seen. Yeah, he could look like know where the ball was going. He'd go right to that spot and turn around and catch the ball.
He could do it all. He could hit, run, field, and throw.
Born to Tom and Mary Charleston on Indianapolis' Near East Side in October 1896, Charleston's first exposure to Negro League baseball came as a bat boy to the Indianapolis ABCs, one of the first organized black baseball teams, sponsored by the American Brewing Company in the early 1900s. At age 15, Charleston talked himself into the Army, serving in the Philippines, developing his athletic skills in baseball and track. His discharge in 1915 brought him back to the ABCs as a rock-hard 5'11", 190-pound left-handed power hitter and speed demon. And through the next several years, always among the leaders in batting, home runs, stolen bases, and coming up huge in big games.
He's the type of guy who could hit in the clutch very well, in game-winning, doubles, triples.
Oscar Charleston made an even greater impression for the shortness of his fuse.
He was temperamental. He didn't take no stuff off of nobody.
According to Charleston lore, Oscar ripped the hood off a Ku Klux Klansman who had taunted the team after a game, achieving his silence. To hear them tell it, Oscar, while playing winter ball in Cuba, where he was enormously popular, took on half the Cuban army when a Cuban soldier took offense at Oscar's alleged spiking of his brother, the second baseman. In his rookie season in 1915, his temper came close to nipping his career in the bud. In an October game between the ABCs and a team of white Major League All-Stars lined up by Donnie Bush, ABC infielder Bingo DeMoss got into a shoving match with a white umpire over a close call at second. Charleston came storming in from center, reportedly flattened the umpire, creating a brawl that involved fans and club-swinging police in a brouhaha the newspapers called a race riot, with Oscar and Bingo spending the rest of the game in the Marion County lockup. Both were bailed out and allowed to join their team in Cuba after profuse apologies, but even the city's black newspaper, the Indianapolis Freeman, declared, quote, "The players of Charleston's type are drawbacks to the sport and should be barred," unquote. Harsh words about a man who reportedly didn't smoke or drink and brought an early to bed, early to rise discipline to his game.
I think that he was a nice, very nice, kind, polite individual. I think his sense of justice is really what comes through to me when I hear about these stories about him fighting.
By all accounts, Oscar Charleston was considered a gentle, amiable man in between those competitive flare-ups. In 1922, he married a Pennsylvania schoolteacher, Jane Howard, a union that produced no children, their marriage ending in separation 20 years later.
He traveled a lot. I can see why that they would have a little problem. You want your husband with you. And when you've got a husband that's going all the time in business, you have to be very broad-minded.
For Charleston's 36-year career as a Negro player and manager with 14 different teams was one big bus trip, on the road continuously with league games, postseason barnstorming, and Latin American winter baseball. In middle age, he put on a few pounds, forcing a move to first base, the speed gone, but not his ability to abuse a baseball, as his niece, Anna Bradley, finally recalls when she and her family got a chance to watch Uncle Oscar put on a show for his critics at Busch Stadium.
I was saying, my sister and I, "Uncle Oscar, we want a home run. We want a home run." And this lady, she was as large as that piano. That's the truth. She said, "Oscar Charleston's too old and stiff to knock a home run." And when she said that, he hit the ball and knocked it in 16th Street. And I hollered when I come out, I couldn't talk.
Charleston managed several teams, including the Negro League Dream Team Pittsburgh Crawfords, featuring legends Josh Gibson and pitcher Satchel Paige, and later helped Dodger executive Branch Rickey scout and develop black players in preparation for the long overdue integration of Major League Baseball in the late 40s, a dream long denied Oscar Charleston.
I never heard him express bitterness. I think he was hoping for the time that he would live to see it.
Of course, his integration sounded the death knell of the Negro Leagues in the early 50s, with Charleston's last hurrah managing the Indianapolis Clowns in 1954, leading them to a final championship and their transition to a barnstorming comedy act in the mold of the Harlem Globetrotters. After that season, Charleston suffered a stroke in Philadelphia that led to his death on October 5th at age 58. His family took him back to Indianapolis for burial at Flora Park Cemetery on the west side. Oscar Charleston's passing went largely unnoticed by the white establishment sporting press of the day. That would not have surprised Oscar Charleston, but what would have surprised him was a special honor and acknowledgement he received more than 20 years later. That's when Oscar Charleston became the 7th member of the Negro Leagues to be enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame in Cooperstown in 1976 in ceremonies attended by a sister. At long last, Oscar McKinley Charleston of Indianapolis, Indiana, had gotten his due in a game to which he contributed so much for so long and by today's standards for so little. With his lifetime batting average around .360, wrapped around an abundance of home runs, RBIs, and stolen bases, and his impeccable, spectacular defense in center field, Oscar Charleston is often compared to Willie Mays when discussions turn to baseball's all-around best player. The week before Oscar died in 1954, Mays made that fabled catch of Vic Wirtz's long drive to save Game 1 of the 1954 World Series for his New York Giants against the Cleveland Indians. Asked to comment about the catch, one former Negro League player declared, Oscar Charleston would have been standing under it. Well, this baseball's made me hungry, so let's hop in the Pinto and head to the west side Indianapolis to a drive-in that stood the test of time and temperature.